The Hanover Theater is, in my mind, the skies parting and the hand of God touching a community in a way that gave it the future that it deserved.
A comprehensive history of this project, how it evolved from that idea that Paul and Ed had to what it is today, almost reads like a fairy tale.
You know, at first it was a small reopening of a theater, but quickly we realized that there was an opportunity here to build a world-class institution.
I'm really rewarded every day, every time I think about the project. I love this theater. I really do.
It's been a minute, they say now, since the theater was built back in 2008, since it's renovated, and yet it seems like yesterday that we were all working together to do it. And I think we all have something to be very proud of, and it's behind me, right? We all did an amazing job.
Eddie came to me and said, Paul DeMoger and I want to bring Broadway to Worcester. And I said, really? Broadway to Worcester? Really?
Well, at the beginning, I didn't believe in it, to be honest with you. When I first walked in the door here, I said, holy God, this thing ain't never gonna work.
And I thought, they're crazy. They're both crazy.
I said, this is a crazy idea. Like most people, right? Most of us thought it was a crazy idea, except for Paul and Ed.
We thought that if we could get this place up and running, it would be successful. And it really has been successful.
There were no prominent people in the city of Worcester that really wanted to have anything to do with being on a board of directors of a project that was likely to go nowhere. I want to start off with thanking the original board, because these were basically the only people who would listen to Ed and me about this.
Friends of Ed and Paul.
And you know, we're talking about 8 years before this place opened.
It started with a nothing room. And I stood there and I said, you're gonna do what? Ed and Paul, if you have that strength in your mind, can I do it with you?
The most prominent guy that said yes to us was Frank Carroll. You know, if it were not for him, we wouldn't have even had a place to have our meetings.
I never really had a concern, believe it or not. I don't know why. I know it sounds crazy. I never once thought it would not happen.
So in early May 2000, there were 5 of us across the street, and we were all talking about the fact that Worcester was a big metropolitan center, and out of the top 100, it was the only one that did not have a place to do Broadway shows. So we looked across the street, and there was a sign from Kelleher and Sadowski that this building was for sale.
We were so naive, we thought we could get it open for about $350,000.
This theater has a long history. I believe it was 1905 when it was the Franklin Square Theater. It changed a few times, but in 1926, Thomas Lamb was hired by Sylvester Poli to make it into the Poli Palace. And I remember coming here as a kid, and it was the palace. There were the chandeliers. It was a beautiful theater. But National Amusements bought the theater, I think, in 1968. They decided that they were going to put 4 theaters in this building.
I grew up in the city, and I went to movies there. I saw The Towering Inferno. I saw Poseidon Adventure, Godfather, I mean, you name it.
And then Ed had the idea about going to Providence to talk to the folks that manage Providence Performing Arts Center.
So we took a ride to Providence. We knocked on the door. We said, we'd like to see the manager. And they said, okay. And we sat down for about 2 hours and told them what we wanted to do. And they said, well, first of all, you can't do it as a for-profit. You don't have enough money. You've got to set up a nonprofit, and you have to get National Amusements to donate the building.
My association with this project began in about 2000. I got a phone call from Ed, and out of the blue. I mean, I've known Ed all my life, but anyway, he called and said, Mike, I need your help. We want to acquire the Poli Palace. At the time, of course, it was the Lowe's Poli. And I said, well, what are you going to do with that? Well, we have to go to Sumner Redstone, National Amusements, and convince them that they should release the building to us, and we want to make a performing arts center out of the place. This was a phase in this process, by the way, that I refer to as irrational exuberance. So I said, all right, give me some of the details. He said, we need a couple of things from you. And like everything, there's good and bad news. He said, the first thing, we need a study that discusses the scope of work required and a cost estimate to do the construction. And I said, well, that's obviously the bad news. He said, no, that's the good news. The bad news is we can't pay you.
Ed Medaus and Paul DeMoga came to see me in my congressional office, which used to be on Mechanic Street, and they said, we have an idea. And I said, okay, what's the idea? Well, we want to turn the old Showcase Cinema into a live theater. And I'm like, terrific.
We got an appraisal for $1.2 million, and we asked Congressman Jim McGovern and his chief of staff, Ed Augustus, to come with us to Dedham to see if they'd give us the theater.
Sumner Redstone's daughter was not there, but all of the vice presidents were there. We met for about 3 hours.
And I think they said, how much do you want to pay for this, you know? And my response was, we want to pay nothing. And I think they were a little shocked that I said that. I said, we want you to donate this. I mean, you can't, revitalize this property. It's just falling apart. I mean, you have liability for all of this. I mean, you hand it over and you take the tax write-off.
When we went out to get back in the car, Jim said, they're going to donate the building to you guys.
We ended up forming Palace Management, which was a company, and I was the first president, and Ed and Paul were the other partners in the company. And finally, the deal was struck, and it was for $1. And Ed and I and Paul signed the papers, and the Palace Management took over the theater, and then the rest is history.
The metaphor or the fairy tale that came to my mind really was the Wizard of Oz. The two of them started down a path, into the woods, like Judy Garland and Toto.
If I remember correctly, shortly after they assumed ownership, the pipes froze.
The roof was leaking. It was like being on a sinking ship when you walked down behind where the stage would have been. The water was pouring in there all the time.
We had to pump the cellar out and then fix the fire alarm, and that cost us about $42,000, which, of course, we didn't have.
And they're putting tens of thousands of dollars on their credit cards. What are you guys doing? What are you doing?
At that point, I asked myself, and my wife actually asked me, what are we getting ourselves in for?
I was used to him being in businesses and having mishaps, so to speak. However, that was a pretty big mishap.
To make great things happen, sometimes it takes people with big dreams and who are willing to risk a lot.
To understand Ed and Paul's vision and the commitment that they made to making this happen, I think it's really hard for people to understand if they didn't see the state of the theater when they walked into it. The seats had been torn out, it was in complete disrepair, and I think a lot of people would have just said, oh, let's bulldoze this.
We had the privilege of walking through the old, dirty, upside-down theater from the rafters to the stage.
Even when you walked through the building way back then, it was majestic.
The initial tour that they offered to a whole bunch of people from the city showed that this place needed more than a little tender, loving care.
We said to Juana, your money will be the last one in. He said, beautiful. This is what we're going to pledge, because he knew we were never going to succeed.
When I first came on board, there was a board of directors, and there were a few local foundations that had pledged their support if the rest of the money were raised. There were a lot of people that sort of said, well, I'm in if everybody else is in.
The more people that bought onto it, the more people felt it was, well, maybe it wasn't a crazy idea.
As it got closer, where it looked like we could do it, Mary DeFutis came forward. with a very large donation.
I met with everyone that was involved at the time, and I looked at the pictures, and they talked about what needed to be done to resurrect the theater. And I thought, oh, this is a wonderful dream. This would be a highlight of Main Street. This will draw people to Worcester.
And that really kind of made it a real project.
Mary DeFutis was just so passionate, so energetic, so enthusiastic about, we can do this. And with her leadership, a lot of significant individual donors came forward.
And we decided that we'd better find out how we could support the theater, but also secure good seating. So I came down, spoke with Nell Azor. She gave me a tour. We had hard hats on at the time walking around because we never knew what was going to fall. Nothing did.
And then tremendous credit belongs to Fred Eppinger.
This was about pretty aggressive involvement, right? And making sure people like the WBDC and Dave Forsberg and the community was involved.
WBDC, they did a hell of a job.
We were at a meeting, and then President and CEO of Hanover Insurance, Fred Eppinger, agreed to the naming rights deal and also agreed to guarantee the shortfall in the fundraising. That opened the floodgates for historic tax credits, new market tax credits. That meeting was a real turning point in the development of the project.
It is damn hard to raise $30 million plus for a not-for-profit. I don't think it's ever been done in the city. It's really hard to do a renovation of this magnitude, right? And we had to do it with an organization that didn't exist. And when I met Troy, I really was blown away by his capability and competence and his kind of passion for what we were doing. And it made me comfortable that we could partner in a more formal way.
I can't help, of course, be proud of the Hanover Insurance Group's role in the success of the theater from the early days and the level of commitment that we made, both financially and in human resources.
Jen Turka was the project manager. Every night, Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock, we had a project team meeting. So every night, I didn't know what time I was going to get home. It could be an hour, it could be a 2-hour meeting. You just didn't know.
I worked for an insurance company and never did I think I would get an experience like this to be able to open a theater and just all of the different things that I was able to be involved in. It was absolutely amazing.
When the theater first became an idea of Ed Madaus and Paul DeMoga, we had a mutual friend that introduced them to me. I was running the small little Stoneham Theater just north of Boston. It's called Boston Stage Company now. So they came and asked if we would be interested in running this big theater once they got done with the restoration. And we said no. It would have been the tail wagging the dog. But I was interested enough that I got involved with the architect, and pretty soon over the next several years, I just kind of fell in love with the project and then joined it full time. I'm a theater person, so when I started talking to people about this project, I did it from that perspective, from the perspective of a great city needs a great theater, and theater education is so important, and the culture, what culture brings to a city is important. And it kind of fell on deaf ears, and it didn't take too long to figure out that what was really motivating was what it would do for downtown.
It was a first step in the rejuvenation of Worcester and the renaissance of Worcester.
I can think of one other person too. She's not here tonight. Stacia Hovhannisyan. I'm sure a lot of you remember Stacia. She ran music Worcester for many years.
I clearly remember one meeting in which we brought everyone together. There were naysayers, as we've experienced in Worcester, to no surprise. And Stacia got up and gave a fiery speech about how important this is to the overall arts community.
And Stacia got up and said, look, I think this thing can really work. And I think she convinced a lot of people in Worcester that there was a need for a theater like this with a proscenium.
I remember thinking, they'll never get this done. We'll never get enough money, because every time we got enough money, they needed a little bit more.
We wanted to be able to do Broadway shows here. We wanted to do the ballet here.
We had to knock the back wall of the building down and push it out 12 feet so that the stage could have a full 40 feet of depth, which was necessary because the Broadway shows touring around the country are a lot bigger than they were 80 years ago.
The TNG came through with the land swap so we could expand the stage.
Also the whole front of the building. You know, we took down the wooden framed, questionably structurally sound building in front of the theater and built a new grand lobby with glass facing the street. Have that kind of street presence we thought was going to be really important to give people an indication of the quality that was inside.
We brought in Peter Nesson, Bob Nesson, and Julie Harden, Nesson Associates.
We realized that the project was going to cost about $30 million. Took us a while to figure that out. We raised $18 million through tax credits. We had a very small mortgage of $4 million, which I'm happy to say has been paid off. And then the rest was through foundations and grants and charitable contributions.
The way historic tax credits work is you need a facade to preserve. The outside of this building was covered in concrete block. There was no facade visible. And so the National Park Service gives you 20%. State historic tax credits are a little different. Those credits are controlled by the Secretary of State, and there's not an unlimited pool.
I'll always remember at the time I was teaching at Boston College, and I would go to Mass at the chapel at noontime, and who would go there also but Bill Galvin, Secretary of State, who had control of those tax credits. And one time I walked in, he was in the last pew, and I leaned over and whispered in his ear, "Worcester really needs those tax credits for the Hanover Theatre." He said, "Not now, not now."
The exciting part, the downstairs, you would never know that it had anything historical about it. It was very modern, just plain white plaster walls. Upstairs, when you went upstairs, it was like being in another world. It was all preserved.
This room that we're sitting in right now was the manager's office. And this is where they stored popcorn and candy. And that was all covered by wallboard. And I noticed that there was a dirty outline of the window frame on the wallboard. So I got a claw hammer and I broke through the wallboard, and big enough to poke my head through with a flashlight. And there was the facade, which outside you can see has all the light bulbs, and that window right there was worth $16 million in historic tax credits.
There was no chance. There was absolutely no chance to get it done without that tax credit funding. Made all the difference.
Preservation of the historic features of this project, this building, were key to its success.
The selection of the right architect and the right construction company who had the historical experience to renovate the building. We had a very, very strong team.
Fred Eppinger insisted on a wow factor when he agreed to give us $3 million for naming rights.
We wanted to have an impact when somebody walked in to say, wow.
We sat over in Frank Carroll's office night after night and had a million meetings and decided, no, we're not going to have fake brass. We're going to have real brass. We want this to last forever.
It was a complex set of renovations, remodeling, new construction.
Sally Bowditch came to do the painting and the gold leaf on the theater ceiling.
There's actual gold leaf on the rosettes that match, well, over here where the chandeliers are hanging down, those rosettes that go around the chandeliers and up on the ceiling itself, on the dome itself, that's real gold leaf.
They had a scaffolding there, so we climbed up and we laid on the scaffolding and we wrote our names on the ceiling before she painted. It was an exciting day. It really was.
You look at it and you have to take the modern with the old, and you say to yourself as you walk in and you start to look up, you look at the balcony and you see the pillars and all the stuff there. And then of course you have the grand staircase going up. These are the things that, you walk in and you say, damn, that's pretty good.
It's really special to be part of something at its creation. And I think that's what all the board members feel, that we were there at the beginning and we all made something happen.
We'll never forget the time of building and working together, and there were no saints and no sinners.
It wasn't easy to get it done. There were a lot of sleepless nights.
People that were board members had voices, and they weren't shy about expressing their feelings.
It was exhilaration. It was just total admiration for the job that everyone had done when they pulled together, and the team, the effort, the excitement for the city.
Because that's what this is really all about. It's about the people.
And to know that we left a little mark in this heart of the Commonwealth.
I like to think of it as this awesome grassroots effort. It's sort of organic in the way that it grew up and blossomed by local Worcester people who care a ton about this community and put blood, sweat, and tears into the success of the theater.
It's incredible the vision that they had, the commitment that they and their wives, their families had, and and I get emotional thinking about it because I'm grateful that they made that commitment, because we wouldn't be here today.
I go way back with Sandy. We were on a bowling team together, and we used to go up and ski at Wachusett Mountain together. So, and I have to say this about Sandy. She spent many, many days after work, on weekends, doing our financials right in the beginning.
And I remember walking out onto the balcony with Margaret Madaus and just watching her look at this beautiful venue and hear music being played for the very first time and seeing the dream of her and her husband and their friends come true.
I do remember the first time I heard the orchestra warming up and the excitement filled the air. And once they started playing, I had this feeling that I didn't know if I could contain myself.
Witnessing that moment was really an incredible culmination of so much hard work and commitment from so many people.
The key to this project for me was always everyone had to touch it and be involved. Because it wasn't about getting it built, it was about getting it used and people coming downtown and getting involved. We needed every college to contribute in some way. We needed every corporation to contribute in every way. We had to get every foundation.
So we as a bank decided to make the final commitment to kind of complete all of the renovations, that needed to be done here. Now, my board thought I was stupid, crazy, because they said, you're going to lend them how much? And with no collateral in effect? And I said, yeah, it's a really good deal, and we're going to do very well by this. And we did. The best thing we could have done, probably one of the best loans we ever made, quite frankly.
You know what I'm really proud of is not so much that we had a big $1 million donor in Mary DeFutis or a $3 million donor in Hanover Insurance. I'm proud of the fact that we have 180 seats in the theater that have little plaques on them for the names of families that gave $10,000 apiece. Who knew you could get 180 families to donate $10,000 in Worcester? That's what I'm proud of.
My name's on the handle on the seat of that right down there. So it's really an honor to be here.
We worked our hearts out to make sure that this edifice was going to be open on the day of the opening number.
Everybody who was involved in kind of part of the team Like Troy's brother came up and helped out with a ton of stuff. Nell's kids were helping out with stuff, and sometimes they would just come in and energize us.
We started off with a very lean, not mean, but very lean team. And the amount of work that everybody across the community did when they rolled up their sleeves and the amount of progress that was made every day towards our grand opening is incredible.
This became an example of what could be done, and people at that time in Worcester were largely looking back, not looking ahead. But by gathering that support, it was a conviction that, we did this, we could do a lot of other things.
By the time it was all said and done, and the theater was built, we had changed the mission from we want to bring Broadway to Worcester to we're going to operate one of the best world-class theaters ever.
And so to see this come back to life, back to a glory that maybe hadn't seen since its vaudeville days, is a real source of pride.
This had risen from the ashes, right? It was a resurrection. And people walked in this building and they couldn't believe it. They just couldn't believe it. It was awe.
I think the greatest experience was opening night, because we were still painting, we were still hanging chandeliers, we were laughing with each other that Bernadette Peters better be careful not to get any paint on her dress.
Funny story about opening night, actually. We had specifically put the flashlights in a specific spot, and somebody thought they were just boxes, and they moved them. And so we were running around like in the bowels of the theater trying to see if we could find them. And we're both in formal gowns at this point, running around doing this.
Opening night was just amazing.
Oh my God, glitz and glamour and the pulse. You could actually feel the floor moving. It was incredible.
I'm so honored to be the first artist chosen to reopen this beautiful Hanover Theatre. And the restoration is gorgeous. I'm in Worcester, Mass. I've never been in Worcester, Mass.
Opening night, she was laying on the piano in a red velvet dress. I will never forget it. My heart was leaping out of my chest. I was so happy.
And there were strobe lights and a red carpet and ice sculptures in front of the building, and it was breathtaking.
I can't imagine Worcester any longer without the Hanover Theatre. It brings so much culture, so much joy to so many people to have a theater of this caliber.
So we have volunteers who have been with us for 15 years.
The volunteers are an integral part of the theater.
They're an incredible group of people. I think there are over 200 of them that come in. And they have a smile on their face, and they're there to greet you and help you, and they're really the reason a lot of people feel comfortable coming here.
There's really nothing like a volunteer, because they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart and for nothing else.
And they're sort of these unsung heroes that have so much fun together. You know, the laughter and the friendships.
And it's amazing how many people ask us how much we get paid for doing this. And they're shocked when we say we do it for free because we love the theater.
Don Phipps, who had created this Wurlitzer theater organ in his workshop in New Bedford over decades, contacted us and said, I'm looking for a place to donate this instrument as a legacy. And so it was really an opportunity. This is an instrument that's worth more than $1 million. And he's looking to not only give it to us, but put in all of the labor himself to install it in the building himself. And the idea that we could bring it back to life was just powerful.
But this has just been the answer to a dream of anyone that has a 600-pound elephant and needs to find a place to put it. No one could ask for anything better to display the organ than Troy's production each Christmas of the Christmas Carol.
We haven't really sat on our laurels, have we? The first big change was the addition of the conservatory.
I couldn't be more excited with what has happened with the conservatory. I mean, it's spectacular.
Performing arts education allows a child to feel seen and heard and allows them to participate in the world in sometimes non-traditional ways. The reality is that kids, we all need to play, and that's what the performing arts allows us to do.
You see the pent-up demand that was in this region, frankly, for both youth and adults. As you know, the classes fill up within minutes.
The conservatory now, after 6 years, is bringing in 500 students a year to learn performing arts.
The conservatory is consistent vitality, people coming in and out of the doors every day of the year.
And the conservatory is such an asset to the community, really, giving people an opportunity. And the performances that the conservatory puts on are first class.
Brick Box Theater at the Jean McDonough Arts Center, the next block over, is another opportunity with THT Repertory for us to produce our own work in Worcester.
And now, because of THT Rep, you can see a professional play in the heart of downtown Worcester in this spectacular space that has so much Worcester sort of vibe built into it. To the founders of the Hanover Theatre, I would say, thanks for being the crazy ones who step and trust that the bridge will appear, are the ones who make big change.
But for this theater, in my view, the city would not have torn down Worcester Center Mall. But for this theater, we would not have Polar Park. But for this theater, the center of Worcester behind City Hall would not exist. And I say those things because that this theater was built demonstrated to people things that Worcester people did not think could be accomplished.
The Hanover's greatest impact is in what it meant to the spirit of this city. It elevated the spirit of those who live in Worcester and know this city.
I feel like the theater is just kind of still in its infancy in some weird way.
What I do know about the Hanover Theatre and the way the Hanover Theatre is run, that they will take every opportunity to grow the organization wherever they feel the community needs their input.
It's so much bigger than even just the theater, and I think that's what makes the partnership between Hanover Insurance and Hanover Theatre so strong.
Here we are in our 15th anniversary year, and it's fun to look back and look at how far we've come in that time and what we looked like 15 years ago when we first opened with Bernadette Peters and the Rhode Island Symphony Orchestra in March 2008.
This isn't just slam dash, throw it together. This was done with care, with thought, with such professional expertise, and we're so proud. We're so proud of what has been accomplished here.
We're thankful to all of our friends who stuck by us, thankful for the people that came on later and have guided this theater to what it is today.
Whether it's the conservatory or the Brick Box Theater that the McDonoughs have sponsored, it just shows the way this thing has been, as I said, a catalyst for other activities and for the city.
And I think that our concept of Carroll Plaza as a hub for entertainment, where you can go this way to the Hanover Theatre and this way to the Jean McDonough Arts Center and this way to the conservatory stage, I think has legs. And I think that will be other spaces within a block of us, I think, are likely to spring up. I think 15 years from now, this will be a neighborhood that is about the arts and theater, not just a building.
My hope is that the building is always loved. I hope, Mary's example as a patron, staying with the project long after it opened and having an interest in it. Someone else someday comes along and picks up that mantle and beats a drum for preserving this building for the long term. That's my hope.
I'm very proud of this building. It's beautiful. It's way more than I had hoped it would be.
It was a wish and a prayer and it's been a dream come true, really.
This is in the most noble sense, a community project, a community space that everybody should take pride and ownership in.
City of Worcester, the community of Worcester, the businesses of Worcester, the foundations of Worcester, the leadership of Worcester, and the average citizen all participated in this, game changer called the Hanover Theatre.
You always have a vision of what you think something can become, and you pray that that thing happens. And this one has so exceeded my expectations and so connected to the vision of the city that a lot of people had. It's pretty cool.
This is what every city needs, and we're growing. Worcester's growing.
I am grateful to everybody here who had a role in helping make this happen. I'm especially appreciative of Ed and Paul, without whom I would never have been here, and without whom the theater would never have been here. So